Big political news in the United States. Democrat Joe Biden has chosen Kamala Harris as his running mate to take on Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. After weeks of speculation, presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has picked U.S. Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate to take on President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence in the November presidential election. Harris was long considered a frontrunner for the role and could become the first female and black vice president in the history of the United States. But how will she impact the ticket with Biden, and why did he choose her? Well, joining me now from the White House is CGTN's Nathan King. With us too from Washington, D.C. is Ameshia Cross. She's a Democratic strategist and commentator. Also with us from Washington is Joseph Williams. He is senior news editor at U.S. News and World Report. And with us too is Steve Chaggaris. He is a longtime political journalist and analyst. Thank you to all of you for joining us. And Nathan, let me start with you. What can you tell us about Kamala Harris, and why was she chosen?
Well, it is a historic choice, a female candidate, the first black candidate, but you also forgot Asian. She has an amazing life story. Her mother, a scientist from India, her father, an economist from Jamaica. She has an incredible life story in terms of academic achievement, a fierce lawyer rising through the ranks, a prosecutor, controversially too, pushing quite a strong law and order angle as a prosecutor in California. That may hurt her on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, but also, I mean, you've seen her in the Senate and in committees grilling the likes of Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court nominee, recently Chad Wolf, the acting head of Homeland Security. She holds no prisoners, is a fierce debater, and also clashed with Joe Biden in the first primary presidential debate. This also goes to show that he's willing to accept someone who's pushed back against him. But he had a fantastic field to choose from. He said it was going to be a woman. Susan Rice, for example, the former UN ambassador and national security advisor under President Obama, Karen Bass, chair of the Black Caucus in Congress, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. I could go on and on and on. Elizabeth Warren. You know, so many powerful, accomplished women. But in the end, Kamala Harris ticked a lot of the boxes. I hate to say that phrase because all these are people too. And it sort of fits into this progressive yet middle of the road yet willing to listen to progressives. And elections are won in the middle in this country, as the midterm elections in Congress showed. And I think they're banking on a lot of that.
Right, Nathan, as you pointed out, lest we forget, Kamala Harris was herself in the race to become the nominee for the Democratic nomination for president. And there was one of those debates, I think it was the first debate at the beginning of the summer. It was a very contentious debate, and she actually took on Joe Biden, who was standing next to her, and actually criticized him pretty severely on his record on race. Let's take a look back at what happened there.
Sure.
I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. Mm-hmm. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
So Joe Biden used to hang around with segregationists. That's a polite way of saying racists, but appears all is forgiven now.
Well, I mean, you know, as a member of the Senate, you can't really avoid it. I mean, I think one of the senators there was Strom Thurmond, right? You know, there's still a statue of him in South Carolina at the back end of the state capitol. Yeah, I mean, you know, it was a very well-made point. It showed that Kamala Harris can push back on what was then a presumptive nominee. And let's face it, Joe Biden would have been down and out had it not been for the intervention of Congressman Jim Clyburn in South Carolina and the overwhelming vote of the African-American community, especially African-American women. I was there. It was quite an incredible turnaround for him. And I think this is part of the reason that Kamala Harris is on the ticket. Now, Could he have chosen, for example, someone who reflects the more progressive wing of the African-American vote, especially in the wake of the killing of George Floyd? Absolutely. But, you know, politics, presidential politics, are generally won on the margins. And the House victory in 2018 with 40 seats picked up did not happen in strong progressive districts. They happened in the suburbs with women, non-college educated women sometimes as well. So this is where elections tend to be won and lost. And whoever complains about the system, I totally get it, but that's the system.
Ameshia Cross, Kamala Harris is now officially part of the Democrat ticket to take on Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence in the November election. President Trump, of course, is very quick to respond to President Biden's choice. This is what the president had to say. Let's listen.
She is a person that's told many stories that weren't true. She's very big into raising taxes. She wants to slash funds for our military at a level that nobody can even believe. She is against fracking.
So what do you make of the choice, Ameshia?
It's a great day. It's a great day to be a Democrat. It's a great day to be a Black woman in America. I think that what we see in the choice of Kamala Harris is Joe Biden really paying attention and having his ear to the streets. The South Carolina primary really set Joe Biden's momentum in place. The majority of the people who made Joe Biden who he is in terms of getting him elected time after time, even when it seemed like he was down and out, have been Black women. And the Democratic Party, for the longest, has owed a great debt to Black women specifically. And I think that this showcases that he is listening. He's listening to the streets, but he's also being attentive to the fact that Kamala Harris brings a lot to his presidential ticket. Specifically, she's not someone who's afraid to take charge. She's not someone who is afraid to land some hits. And I think that when you're running against someone like a Donald Trump, you have to have a running mate who is strong, a running mate who is quick on her feet, and a running mate who understands that this can be a very brutal race, and you have to be in it to win it. And I think that Kamala Harris is someone who is, as they say, ready on day one. In many ways, she was born ready. And this is the race of a lifetime for her, but I also believe that she is more than built for this.
Ameshia, what does she bring to the ticket in terms of the election in November?
Several things. First and foremost, I don't want to underscore the fact that she is an African-American woman. As a woman, and knowing that the electorate across America is predominantly female, the population across America is predominantly female, and growing and steadily, we know that minorities are the people of color are the majority in this country. So I think that she brings those two things, obviously. But aside from that, she brings a level of excitement. Kamala Harris is someone who does not leave a room without people remembering exactly who she was and what she said. She's someone who has a bit of an aura about her that is leadership, that is something people can believe in, that is something that is strong, that is something that is unifying. And I think that she definitely brings those things to the table, especially post the George Floyd protests, where there's this outcry across America for reconciliation, for what looks like unity, for moving forward in some of these race-positive policies. And Kamala Harris is definitely someone who can usher in that wave.
Steve Chaggaris, no matter what we may think about Kamala Harris's ideology or her politics or her record as a prosecutor in California, this is indeed a historic choice, isn't it?
Extremely historic. I mean, this is the first Black woman ever to be nominated to a position on a major party ticket. Look, as historic as it is, it's also a very conventional pick for Joe Biden. This is not a pick that is going to really rock the boat in a lot of ways. And I think that's what he's looking for. He's running a campaign right now that is very safe. And, you know, some people will criticize him for not, leaving his basement. But at the end of the day, he's been leading in the polls, in some cases significantly, pretty consistently, and bringing on Kamala Harris, somebody who, one, has been in the trenches, not only in a presidential race, but has run and won her own political races. But two, somebody who he feels is ready to step into the role of president if need be. I mean, that was one of the big things that he wanted to check off for a running mate. Is this person ready to jump in? This is a man who's going to be 78 years old on November 20th, and I think it's a big part of all this. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, yes, it's extremely historic, but there are a lot of other practical reasons why he chose her.
Joseph Williams, how much pressure was Vice President Biden under to pick a black or African-American, Asian woman in this case to be his running mate?
I would say the pressure was huge. I mean, he was getting an earful from several prominent black African-American, several prominent African-American women in the Democratic Party, the likes of Karen Bass had mentioned that he needs to signal to African-American women, as the previous guest was saying, is that they've been a major part of the Democratic resurgence. Now, again, it is true that in South Carolina, he was pretty much left for dead on the side of the road. He was out of money. He didn't have any major backers. Jim Clyburn came along and pointed the finger at him. Black voters responded, chiefly African-American women. So yes, I think that even if the pressure was not explicit, and there was some explicit pressure, that the pressure was implicit to give a nod to the loyal voters of the Democratic Party, without whom Vice President Biden would not be standing today.
Joseph, you know, politics is about these sort of glorious, symbolic, historic moments like we have seen this afternoon here in the United States, but it's also about arithmetic. And under those terms, what does she do for the ticket?
Again, black women. I mean, let's be honest about it. And she does bring excitement to the ticket. California is pretty much a blue state, so that's basically a wash. But the suburban women that you were discussing earlier, they may look to Kamala Harris and identify with her more than they might have some of the other women on the ticket. Absolutely. Because she does talk the talk. She does have a law enforcement background, and she does have that extra pizzazz. She's a woman who is very accomplished, as you mentioned earlier. She is a woman who is articulate and fast on her feet and fierce in her questioning of people, which is something that a lot of women look at the television and cheer and say, yeah, you know, talk about what was, you know, what we have always been longing to speak of. Specifically in the Kavanaugh nomination, the questioning of the prospective, now current Supreme Court justice, she was especially on point because that whole issue around Kavanaugh was about sexism, sexist behavior, and how women are basically treated as second-class citizens sometimes in this country.
Nathan, you know, we've talked about Kamala Harris's record as a senator, United States senator for the Democrats, but she also served as a prosecutor, as the district attorney in San Francisco, as the attorney general in California. There are some who believe that her record there is less than stellar. There was a piece in the New York Times many, many months ago which said this about her. It said, time after time, when progressives urged her to embrace criminal justice reforms as a district attorney and then the state's attorney general, Ms. Harris opposed them or stayed silent. Is that going to come back to haunt her?
Yes or no, depending on where you are in the political spectrum here. In fact, one progressive on my Twitter feed, just before I came on, put up a monopoly board, a Kamala Harris monopoly board, and every square was go to jail. That's how they feel about her. Because when she was in San Francisco and also as Attorney General, remember this was a slightly different time, although not too long ago, when the mainstream wing of the Democratic Party really sort of bought into this whole law and order message that the Republicans had brought in. Remember, this is the time of welfare queen rhetoric. This is the time of 3 strikes and you're out. Remember Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton talking about super predators, where there was a real sort of microcosm on African-American crime, even though it was a complete caricature in many cases. And remember, the Democrats lost an election when Dukakis was running against George H.W. Bush on the Willie Horton ad. There was this whole idea that the establishment had to move more to the right when it came to be tough on crime. And she was very much wrapped up in that. Now, she was defined like that. However, times have changed. And if you listen to the Kamala Harris that was out on the stump, you will hear a very, very different message. And I can guarantee you now, especially in the wake of the George Floyd killings, Breonna Taylor, and the demonstrations that we have seen, she not only is going to try and make her law and order pass, try and work for the voters that you need in the middle of America, but also her experience and connections to law enforcement of her as a reformer, but not necessarily a revolutionary. I can almost guarantee that is going to be the script.
Ameshia Cross, what are your thoughts on Kamala Harris's record as District Attorney in San Francisco, as Attorney General in California? Because looking at some of her record, she fought vigorously against or at least to uphold wrongful convictions. She also supported state legislation that would imprison parents of truant children, and these were mostly African-American children. She refused to support the wearing of cameras by police and opposed a law requiring her office to support investigations of shootings by police officers. These are some of the defining issues in the United States today, and that's her record.
I agree with a lot of what was previously said, but to add to that, as the daughter of an incarcerated parent, my mom actually died in prison. When I think about Kamala Harris's record, and I think about the time frame in which we have to take into context this record, there is something to be said about both people on the right and the left being terribly wrong on criminal justice in the 90s and even into their early 2000s. We have to remember that criminal justice reform is a new buzzword for the majority of America. People thought 3 strikes you're out was good. People thought that mandatory minimum sentencing was good. People thought that the war on drugs was going to be something that ushered in this new wave of anti-drugs across American society. That was something that was pushed and elevated by AGs, prosecutors across the country, regardless of their political stripe. So I think that when we take into context the era that she was making these decisions in, and the fact that they were backed by, in many cases, Congressional Black Caucus members. Again, Congressional Black Caucus members also backed the Clinton crime bill at the time it was written. The same people who continually have a lot of African American support today were supportive of the same legislation that locked up many of black people across this country. So I think that in context, we have to think about the time, and we have to give to Kamala Harris the ideology that she has developed over time to notice that a lot of the things that she did and stood for at that time were wrong. The same credibility that we give to the people who are working in criminal justice reform today, many of which are legislators who back in the 90s and up to about 2013, 2014, even some 2016, were on the other side of the fence when it came to criminal justice and how they viewed a lot of the laws and policies that, quite frankly, have caused a lot of detriment to the African American community.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to add to it, I think also look at what they're campaigning against. The US president has styled himself in the last month or two as the law and order president. And basically, even in just the last hour or so, has painted out democratic cities out of control. Yeah. Well, I think her Kamala Harris' past, no matter how controversial, is actually going to counter that argument to a large extent.
Judge Williams, no doubt Kamala Harris is going to try very hard to transcend that record, but is there a risk here that she could alienate the progressives in this country who might have wanted to vote for this ticket?
Well, I think that's already happened. I mean, certainly in the Veep stakes, there was a lot of weight put by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party against Kamala Harris. They saw her as a law and order candidate. They saw her as someone who fights against what they're concerned with, especially in that particular venue. But the other thing is that her policies as a district attorney, as attorney general, I mean, to be honest, they're pretty much in line with most district attorney generals, no matter how, no matter what states they've come across. I mean, certainly district attorneys and prosecutors have to work with police departments, and that is the people who they see day in and day out. So it's not that unusual to to see that she might have been against prosecuting police officers, because these are the people that she needs their support, not only day in and day out on the job, but also on the campaign trail if she wants to stay in office. And following the rules of the road probably held her in good stead because it allowed her to advance, and she didn't get a whole lot of opposition from the rank and file in police departments.
Although we do have prosecutors in the country, like the prosecutor in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, I think it is, his name escapes me, who has taken on the police, who has been very forward-looking in the way he does his job.
Well, those are the exceptions rather than the rule. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you will have prosecutors who will try to keep the police, if not happy or calm, but certainly not reviling against them and trying to undercut their power. I mean, it's a dangerous tightrope walk that you make when you become a prosecutor, because you've always got these opposing forces working both for and against you.
Steve
And we
Chaggaris.
still have to remember timing, because the Progressive Prosecutors Association literally started a year and a half ago.
Right.
Where we're running progressive
Right.
prosecutors. This wasn't something that existed in the early 2000s. It wasn't something that existed in the 90s. Progressive prosecutors and people with a criminal justice reform mindset is still a very new thing in America.
Steve Chaggaris, you know, the vice presidential position, and Kamala Harris is only a nominee right now, she's not vice president yet, is seen in many quarters as just a symbolic position. You are there at the side of the president. In many respects, the vice president plays second fiddle to the president. It's a low-profile role, it's a quiet role, but we know Kamala Harris to be a very ambitious person. Do you think she has the discipline to play that second fiddle, to be in the shadows rather than in front of the lights?
That's a question that's unanswerable right now. We'll have to see how she acts on the campaign trail. I have a feeling that there was a discussion about this, and you know, I think look, you have to assume she understands what her role is going to be, and it seems as if what her role is going to be is, one, somebody who is going to be out there representing the Biden-Harris ticket, meaning that Biden's at the top of the ticket and she is his running mate.
Yeah.
Secondly, that she will be out there as an attack dog against the President of the United States, and she had a lot of experience doing that, running for president, and that she's going to have to hold her own, if not succeed, on the debate stage in October with Vice President Pence. That's a big part of being the running mate. I think those are the three top things that are going to define her role here. Whether she is too ambitious, I mean, that's for people to judge as she goes through this process. But to suggest that she's going to be like that just because she's an aggressive woman, I think is probably a step too far.
Right, Steve, I asked that question because, you know, when keep calling him President, Vice President Biden was asked about his, what he was looking for in a vice presidential candidate, he said, look, I'm looking for someone who was like me when I was vice president to President Barack Obama.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is a similar type of pick, right? Because in terms of policy, you could argue that they are, quote, simpatico, which is a word that Biden used as somebody who was looking for in a running mate. Somebody who's not too far off the reservation of where Biden is in terms of policy. So there's that. Secondly, somebody who is ready to take on the role of president if need be. And I think Biden saw himself as somebody, when he was vice president, as somebody who had years and years of experience in Washington, knew how Congress worked, and was able, and felt that he was able to step in at any given time. And I think he wants his running mate, and he sees this in Kamala Harris, as somebody who can be like he was under Obama. And let's not forget, by the way, that Kamala Harris has a very good relationship with President Obama. And Obama was out there right after the pick saying how great of a choice this was for Biden. He's a big fan of hers. Probably a good chance that he got into Joe Biden's ear during this process and put in a few good words for Kamala Harris.
I was just going to ask you that, Steve. Very quick answer I wanted from you was, do you think President Obama had something to do with this choice?
Cool.
I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Nathan, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to agree. And by the way, the word ambitious is always attached to women and not men, which is kind of ridiculous when you get to the heartbeat away from the presidency. But yeah, of course she's ambitious. And the good thing is that, you know, Vice President Biden has indicated he may be a one-term president.
Yeah.
So you need someone to be there to assume that mantle, that someone can get their hands around both not just the policy ideas and back you up and deal with Congress and the party, but also someone who can step into your shoes. So I think that's definitely reflected in Kamala Harris. Can I also say one other thing?
Yeah.
We're looking about the cabinet here. And, you know, there was a lot of talk about Susan Rice filling this job. Susan Rice would be a fantastic Secretary of State in terms of the Democratic Party. So perhaps one of the choices of having Kamala Harris as vice president is because you can already see roles for people like Susan Rice. You can see roles for Elizabeth Warren, for example. You could see a definite role for Karen Bass or even Gretchen Whitmer. You know, all the women that were under consideration could hold very, very strong positions within a cabinet. And I think we might be seeing a little leaking of names at that as we go forward and potentially into this convention week, albeit virtual and remote.
Well, and that's another thing that, if I may, that's another thing that you might speculate from a Biden presidency, or certainly his candidacy, is that these names will get leaked, and you could have a cabinet that's very, very representative of the women of the women's vote. That you could have a lot of women in very powerful positions under a Biden presidency. The other thing that I kind of wanted to mention is that Harris is going to be under significant microscope. She's going to be examined a lot because Joe Biden will be the oldest president when he takes the oath of office. And heartbeat away from the presidency, it's not just a cliche at this point, because Biden himself has had several health problems that have been very, very serious over the years.
Ameshia, on that point, you know, the fact that, I mean, many of us have heard that Joe Biden will probably not stand for a second term if he wins the election in November. So that makes Kamala Harris's position even more important. But could there be a backlash from suburban white America to this choice?
Suburban white voters seem to overwhelmingly support Joe Biden already. I think that the vice presidential pick in Kamala Harris was not a push for suburban white voters at all, as much as it was a unification of African American voters and making a promise that should be kept in terms of ensuring that African American voters feel as though they are taken into consideration when it comes to these leadership positions, because, to be honest, they got Joe Biden where he is. And aside from, you know, just giving lip service to the progress of African American women, how led several movements, how they basically resurrected his campaign and continue to vouch for him in campaign after campaign, I think that it was time to put the proof in the pudding and actually choose someone who resembled what it is and reflected what it is that has actually gotten him as far as he has.
Okay. Judge Williams, very quickly, I've just got about a minute left. What about her international experience? Does she have any kind of foreign policy experience that she could bring to this ticket?
On the face of it, no, not particularly. That's Joe Biden's arena. He's very heavy on foreign policy. That's his bag. Kamala Harris is there for different things, to bring balance to that, to bring a domestic agenda, and to excite the African American voters. And might I add, to indicate or signal that she and others like her may be the face of the Democratic Party going forward, particularly if Vice President Biden only serves a single term.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Thanks for joining us on yet another edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu. Thanks for watching.